Some people might wonder, why am I going over Adele Davis again? Well, one of the simple facts is a lot of people aren't going to go plant-based. They're not going to go 100% plant-based. They're not even going to go plant-centered, although they should. Even Adele Davis would agree that you should have a plant-centered diet. But the point that I would like to make here is there's a very simple way to get more health benefits out of your diet, and that's simply to eat nutritionally dense, unrefined foods, which is what Adele Davis promoted, which is what more or less Dr. Atkins promoted, which is what Weston A. Price promoted, which is honestly what a lot of people promoted. And I'm going to go over this with, something called the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate in a little bit, which kind of promotes exactly what Adele Davis promoted. Okay, so first I'm going to cover Adele Davis here, and then we're going to go over the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate. But let's hear what Adele Davis has to say right now about a football player that just dropped dead and had atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries.
Shocked, of course, and distressed to read of Chuck Hughes' death, the 28-year-old wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, and even more shocked to read in the paper this morning that he seemed to have the insides of an old man. He was suffering from hardening of the arteries. Do you think possibly this could be attributed to the high cholesterol American diet of steak and baked potatoes with butter and whole milk and ice cream? I understand, incidentally, that autopsies are taken in Vietnam of young men who die there, and the same thing is being found.
I think it's just one more piece of evidence of our general malnutrition. For instance, a number of baby formulas, commercial baby formulas, were fed.
Now, please pay special attention to what she's saying here about baby formulas. Okay, please pay special attention to this. And this is why, to be quite honest, and remember, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not an obstetrician, I'm not I'm not a chiropractor, not an LPN, not an RN, I'm nothing like that. But let's hear what Adele Davis has to say about this research that was done regarding basically baby formulas fed to monkeys.
The baby monkeys. And I think they used 5 or 6 different commercial formulas entirely. All of them supposedly just as good as mother's milk, quote, 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 and supposedly very adequate. And at the end of a year, they killed the monkeys and found their blood vessels solid with cholesterol. It isn't just the potatoes with the butter. It is the tremendous amounts of refined foods that people are eating. It's the soft drinks. It's the imitation fruit juices. It's the pie places that are open. It's the
now, what you need to keep in mind is that high consumption of simple carbohydrates, such as sugar, in refined foods raises triglycerides, okay, and can cause non-alcoholic fatty liver, and can impede the ability of the liver to handle things like cholesterol and fat.
Cranberry juice full of sugar. It has to be to get by the tonsils with a little dab of vitamin C, which is nothing but a talking point. It's the fact that the commercial people, care nothing about our health, and all they're interested in is making money off of our foods. And anyone who isn't trained in nutrition or isn't at least aware of nutrition is simply a victim of the commercialism, of the white flour, refined sugar, soft drinks, all sorts of packaged mixes, everything, cereals and so on, that have been robbed of their nutrients and have been put back. We can expect more and more. Actually, this young man's death was the 6th among the football players, and we can expect more and more as the future goes on. I think we're past the point of no return in a great deal of our health now.
Well, of course, orthodox nutritionists who, I guess, have given you a bad time through the years will say, as they have for some time, that if people would choose from the 4 basic groups, meats, vegetables, dairy products, and cereals and breads, that sort of thing, that they can manage fairly well nutritionally. How do you feel about this?
No, I don't think, as far as I know, no one's given me a bad time. If I've been given a bad time, I'm too dumb to know it. But I think maybe sometimes I could give them a little bad time. If one ate only unrefined foods, if you say the basic is whole grain breads and cereals, not enriched, which I'm sure.
So pay special attention to what she's saying here. This is very important. This is very important that you pay special attention to what she's saying right here. Okay, so...
If it's fresh grown fruits and vegetables grown without chemical fertilizers or poison sprays, if it's good meat grown without dimethylstilbestrol, and good milk, preferably raw, safe, preferably medically certified, then a person can get along fine. And I think that includes the basics. But you get all the packaged stuff that we have and all the refined foods, 3/4 or more of the food most people eat is refined, and they've lost the nutrients, and we are producing an awful lot of malformed, brain-damaged babies nowadays.
So let's hear this again.
We are.
Keep in mind what she's promoting here with whole foods.
If you say the basic is whole grain breads and cereals, not enriched, which I'm sure makes it worse instead of better. If it's fresh grown fruits and vegetables grown without chemical fertilizers or poison sprays, if it's good meat grown without dimethylstilbestrol, and good milk, preferably raw, safe, preferably medically certified, then a person can get along fine. And I think that includes the basics. But
now, I don't agree with, all this like hippy-dippy organic stuff. But at that time, this is the 1960s, at that time it was considered that, organic food was much better than non-organically grown food. But listen to what she says here, because this is the truth. Right now, we have an epidemic of autism throughout the world. We have an epidemic of ADHD throughout the world. We have an epidemic of obesity throughout the world. We have an epidemic of childhood obesity throughout the world, okay? Do you think that there might be this might have something to do with the current diets that people are following and the lack of activity? So let's hear what she has to say.
You get all the packaged stuff that we have and all the refined foods. All the packaged stuff that we have and all the refined foods. All the packaged stuff that we have and all the refined foods, 3/4 or more of the food most people eat is refined. And all the refined foods, 3/4 or more of the food most people eat is refined. Or more of the food most people eat is refined. And they
remember, this is the 1960s. This percentage is probably much higher at this point in time.
Lost the nutrients, and we are producing an awful lot of malformed, brain-damaged babies. Are producing an awful lot of malformed, brain-damaged babies now. Are producing an awful lot of malformed, brain-damaged babies now. Are producing an awful lot of malformed, brain-damaged babies nowadays.
So did the genes change, or did something else change, as Walter Veith would say? What changed that's causing these malformed, brain-damaged children? As we know now from folic, the supplementation with folate and the different B vitamins and iron, there's a lot of things that are very important to the proper gestation of a fetus.
We are having the school lunches are absolutely disgraced. Most of it is soft drinks with a greasy hamburger on white bread. There's no nutrients in that. Little dab of protein salt. Drinks with a greasy hamburger on white. Drinks with a greasy hamburger on white bread. Drinks with a greasy hamburger on white bread.
Take note of that. Have school lunches improved? Not really. Not even under the Michelle Obama school lunch program did they really improve.
There's no nutrients in that. Little dab of protein salt. And the degree of malnutrition in America is just getting frightful. It is just frightful.
Adele, how did you first become interested in nutrition?
Actually, I came indirectly because I lived on an Indiana farm as a kid. And from the time I was 10 until 18, I was very, very active in 4-H clubs. And as a result of this 4-H club work, we had a lot of roundups at Purdue University. And so I got very fond. All of my sisters had gone to Indiana University, and the only thing they taught at Purdue was home economics. So I started out at home economics. Then I went on and got my hospital training in New York City as a dietitian. hospital training in New York City as a dietitian. And
It's important to note that Adele Davis was one of the first people properly educated as a dietitian, not a physician, a dietitian, to write on nutrition for the popular consumption by the American public. Okay, that's very important to understand. Her advice is quite good advice. A lot of it you will see echoed in the works of people like, what I've already mentioned. She was an inspiration to Dr. Robert C. Atkins. She was an inspiration to Dr. Nicholas Perricone. Clearly you see a lot of her stuff echoed, not by necessarily being an inspiration, but just some of the same conclusions made by Dr. Joel Wallach, the veterinarian and naturopathic doctor that wrote the book Dead Doctors Don't Lie. So you will see a lot of what she says being echoed into the modern era. And it's important that people understand that. Nutrients are important.
I was very disillusioned by that because I was all full of idealism and how we could make people healthy with good nutrition. And the diets were just horrible. We fed people on 19 cents a day. If they got a gun in their hands, they could have shot us, I'm sure. But we didn't see the people. And so I didn't like that. I liked people too much.
Adele, I would say that nutrition is taken pretty much for granted in America. Why?
I'm not sure nutrition's taken for granted. The uninformed person will think that if they're not hungry, they're well nourished. Think that if they're not hungry, they're well nourished. Think that if they're not hungry, they're well nourished.
This is far too common. This is why a lot of people think that certain diets are adequate that aren't. And this is why people think that, you know, that they're just fine because they can just keep eating whenever they have a dip in energy and things like that. And what happens is they overdo certain macronutrients over others, and they end up overdoing calories because they're not consuming the proper foods.
I think that's perhaps what you mean. Unfortunately, that isn't true. We have just an appalling amount of sickness in America now. We have millions of people have heart disease, millions have arthritis, 22 million have allergies, and there's so many millions of people with diseases. They've either got bad eyes, or we've got brain damage, or we have mentally defective so that they're in hospitals. There's a tremendous number of people in hospital beds, you know, even though they're putting people out on tranquilizers in hospital beds because of mental illness, which is turning out more and more and more to be a nutritional thing.
How much of that sickness would you say is nutritional?
I think that a very great deal of sickness is because of the refined foods. I think we're literally at the mercy of the unethical food, refined food people, the people who take all the minerals and vitamins out of the sugar, out of the flour, make hydrogenated fats.
Take note, she was talking about hydrogenated fats, what we call trans fats. She was talking about these trans fats back in the 1960s. Okay, long before the government agencies and such were talking about them, when they became such a detriment to the public health.
Than leave the natural good fats.
Are pediatricians and obstetricians trained in nutrition?
Some of the medical schools are beginning to give some work in nutrition, but none of it's adequate.
If you read The Wrinkle Cure by Nicholas Perricone, he states this too, that when he went to school to be a physician, that it was highly shunned when he would come in with, you know, the latest works. He used to have to hide it, of Linus Pauling and Adele Davis. He couldn't let people know that he was reading these things, or he would be shunned as a physician. If he let it loose that he was into nutrition, he thought nutrition was something worth pursuing in the medical field.
Most of them have had, but the tragedy is that they have such terrific power over the girls and over the women and the babies. For instance, I have yet to know a baby, unless it's nursed, who's on a good diet. I have never known a formula to be adequate.
You've written another book on disease and health, Let's Get Well.
Yes.
Can you really avoid disease through good nutrition?
Some you can and some you can't. A great deal of...
Now notice she's honest there. Some you can and some you can't. But what we do know from people like Dr. Terry Walls and Dr. Terry Walls' research and Dr. Joel Fuhrman and a lot of these other doctors that are implementing nutritional therapies. I think Dr. Terry Walls is a fine example of somebody that's done this, and people should read the books Minding Your Mitochondria and also the other book, The Walls Protocol, to understand how implementing a whole food diet, and that is definitely a plant-centered diet. So look up Dr. Terry Walls and look up the Walls Protocol and look into that. But we see that nutrition can actually help to reverse diseases such as multiple sclerosis, other autoimmune diseases such as arthritis, etc. And we know this also through people like Dr. Fuhrman, and we know this even through Dr. Atkins, and we know this by doctors actually implementing nutritional strategies. But Dr. Walls is the best research because it was funded, I believe, by the VA. We know that such nutritional measures help with traumatic brain injuries. We know that such nutritional measures help with psychiatric issues. And I'm going to hit play. And that's also, keep that in mind. Remember, I've also brought up the works of Linus Pauling. I've also brought up the works of Abram Hoffer. Dr. Abram Hoffer successfully used niacin and other nutrients such as vitamin C and the other B vitamins and proper diet to treat schizophrenics successfully.
Been much interesting work in the past in which native races who had no refined food.
Now I'm going to go over this, the native races that had no refined foods and how they were in great health, and this is important to understand.
Work in the past in which native races who had no refined foods whatsoever have been investigated, and they found that there was tremendously good health. There was no heart disease, no cancer, no diabetes, no gallbladder disease, no mental disease, no crime, no drugs, no alcoholism, and so on. And apparently, if our food were good, but our nutrients needed to build good health are being thrown away.
Why do you feel that most of the American...
It's not that the nutrients aren't in the food. It's that when you refine the food, okay, this is what you have to understand. There's nothing magical about organic food. There's nutrients in vegetables, regular conventionally grown vegetables. People aren't eating vegetables, at least not enough, okay? They're not eating 9 cups of vegetables a day. They're eating less, if any, okay? People aren't eating whole grains. They're eating refined grains. People aren't even eating whole grains at all. They're eating cake and pasta and things like that. So, and nobody's really eating enough legumes. So you have to understand, these nutrient-dense foods are not being consumed and not in the quantities needed to promote health.
Public doesn't eat that way.
Because we've heard years and years and years of propaganda. We've been told that certain cereals build champions when it did not. You feed it to rats and they die. Any of the cold cereals die. Any of the cold cereals die. Any of the cold cereals. We've been told that white bread builds strong bodies so many ways. Dr. Roger Williams took 10 or 12 different types of white bread, all so-called enriched, and fed it to rats. They all died in about 6 weeks, or almost all of them died. And he brought out that that time was when prisoners would be kept on bread and they thrived. Was when prisoners would be kept on bread and they thrived. Was when prisoners would be kept on bread and they thrived. Was when prisoners would be kept on bread and they thrived.
Take note of that. There was a time when prisoners would be kept on bread and they would thrive, but not on white bread, on whole wheat bread.
Adele, what's your recommendation for adult consumption of milk?
Well, I think adults would be much healthier.
Now, I don't necessarily agree with her view on milk. I don't think milk is necessarily a health food. I think there's a lot to worry about with milk. But this stuff that we know now, like new 5GC, and some of the issues we have with milk, such as the potential to perhaps cause autoimmune diseases through overstimulation of the immune system by proteins in milk being similar to those in the human body and causing an autoimmune response, the body to attack itself. We didn't know these things back in Adele Davis's time, but we do now. So whether or not you agree with her on milk, that's not what's important. What's important to understand here is she does know what she's talking about, and what she's suggesting is far healthier than the average American diet. And if the average person began eating like she suggests, they would get much, much, much healthier than the average American is right now.
Or if they had a whole quart of milk a day. For instance, there's something like 6 million women with aching backs because their bones have been demineralized. Milk is one of your best sources of protein. I like to recommend at least a quart of milk a day to everybody. And it's the only good source of calcium. It's an excellent source of B2, which is an extremely important vitamin.
But we've been told that milk is also a source of cholesterol, which is supposedly dangerous to the health.
Well, the cholesterol problem is there's a lot of misinformation on that, of course, and by physicians.
Now listen to what she says with this, because this is important to note. Now, I don't agree. I don't think that you should be consuming mass quantities of whole milk or cholesterol or things of that nature. But one of the problems with cholesterol and the hardening of the arteries is honestly a lack of the B vitamins, which help you utilize the fats, a lack of vitamin C, which helps to keep cholesterol from oxidizing, and a lack of other vital nutrients required that your body can utilize the fats properly, and she's going to talk about that right now.
Again, because I haven't been trained in nutrition. Cholesterol is high only when the foods are so refined that we haven't the nutrients to utilize it well.
Are there any general rules that you can throw out to the public for keeping themselves healthy with good nutrition?
Yes, I gave that in quite a good deal of detail a while ago.
So listen to this detail of the diet. Now remember what Ellen G. White's diet was. Ellen G. White's diet was simply, and I'm paraphrasing, she said simply eat whole fruit, whole grains, whole beans, and eat liberally of these foods. And that was like the whole diet was vegetables, grains, legumes. That's it. That vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. That was the whole diet by Ellen G. White. And Ellen G. White's dietary recommendations have caused for some of the longest-lived people in the world, the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventists. Now let's hear what Adele Davis has to say here. And I would guarantee you that if people started following these dietary recommendations, barring any allergies or things like that to any of these products, you would see that they too would become quite healthy. So let's hear what Adele Davis's view is on nutrition as a person trained in dietetics from the 1960s. Well, she was trained in the 1930s, but let's hear what she has to say right here.
That in quite a good deal of detail a while ago. Just natural foods. Whole grain bread, cereals, fruits, vegetables, milk, cheese, eggs.
It's that simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. There's nothing refined. If you really a while ago, just natural foods. Whole grain bread, cereals, fruits, vegetables, milk, cheese, eggs.
It's that simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. There's nothing a while ago, just natural foods. Whole grain bread, cereals, fruits, vegetables, milk, cheese, eggs.
It's that simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. There's nothing refined if you really want to build health.
So this is about Harvard School of Health's healthy eating plan, or healthy eating plate. So what you have here is you have your healthy oils, which would be like canola oil, olive oil, avocados, what have you. You have your vegetables, your whole grains, your healthy protein, which can include legumes as your healthy protein. I would recommend lentils or things of that nature. And then your fruits. Notice that the fruits are very small, the vegetables are very large. I would recommend getting rid of the fruits or using things like berries or lower carbohydrate fruits and just using that whole half of the plate to be vegetables, and then having your healthy protein and your whole grains on the other half. Okay, so building a healthy, balanced diet, make most of your meal vegetables and fruits. Half of your plate are vegetables and fruits. Aim for color and variety, and remember that potatoes don't count as vegetables on the healthy eating plate because of their negative impact on blood sugar. So remember, potatoes don't count as vegetables on the healthy eating plant because of their negative impact on blood sugar. That's very important to understand. Go for whole grains, 1/4 of your plant, whole and intact grains, whole wheat, whole barley, whole wheat berries, quinoa, oats, brown rice, and foods made with them such as whole wheat pasta have a milder effect on blood sugar and insulin than white bread, white rice, and other refined grains. Protein power, 1/4 of your plate, protein. Fish, poultry, beans, and nuts are all healthy, versatile protein sources. They can be mixed into salads and pair well with vegetables on a plate. Limit red meat and avoid processed meats such as bacon and sausage. Limit red meat and avoid processed meats such as bacon and sausage. However, do eat fish, poultry, beans, and nuts. Healthy plant oils in moderation. Choose healthy vegetable oils like olive oil, canola oil, soy, corn, sunflower, peanut, and other oils. Okay, so keep in mind, a lot of people might not consider these to be healthy oils because of their omega-6, blah, 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 blah. These oils are shown to promote health, okay? They definitely are. So remember that a low-fat diet does not mean healthy, okay? You want these healthy fats. Drink water, coffee, or tea. Skip sugary drinks, limit milk and dairy products to 1 or 2 servings per day, and limit juice to a small glass per day. Stay active. The red figure running across the healthy eating plates placemat is a reminder that staying active is also important in weight control. The main message of the healthy eating plan is to focus on the type of carbohydrate, so whole carbohydrates, but not potatoes. So whole vegetables, whole fruits, whole grains, and beans are healthy carbohydrates. Refined carbohydrates and white potatoes are not. The healthy eating plan also advises consumers to avoid sugary beverages, a major source of calories, usually with little nutritional value in the American diet. The healthy eating plate encourages consumers to use healthy oils, and it does not set a minimum on the percentage of calories people should get each day from healthy sources of fat. In this way, the healthy eating plan recommends the opposite of the low-fat message promoted for decades by the USDA. Okay, let's move on here. So I've covered this in a previous video. This is Dr. Weston, documentary about Weston A. Price. It's actually footage. And what you're going to see is Dr. Weston Price discovered that some of the healthiest people in the world ate unrefined foods. Okay, what you will notice is a great variety in the types of foods eaten by all of these people that he saw as particularly very healthy and that had very healthy teeth. So let's see what he has to say about these different people. And his message is just like Adele Davis's. Do not eat refined foods. What you should also keep in mind is, if you remember, Adele Davis talked about the primitive tribes that did not suffer from the diseases that we suffer from today.
This way. Come over here. Repeat. How old are you? 40. A number of the teeth have decayed cavities in them. And that has happened because he's not eating enough fish or not getting enough milk. Say, you're a fine, big, strong fella. How old are you? 20. You look as though you're a giant. My. Where'd you come from? Opera. Well, that's the place. Did you eat lots of fish when you were a little boy? Yes. That's the stuff that makes good bodies. If everybody do that, the most universal disease in the world is the decay of the teeth. And unfortunately, we have not known the cause until we've gone to the primitive people to find how they prevent tooth decay. Our difficulty is that we are adding too much white flour and sugar. Difficulty is that we are adding too much white flour and sugar. Difficulty is that we are adding too much white flour and sugar and do not get enough of the foods that carry the minerals and vitamins. Flour and sugar, and do not get enough of the foods that carry the minerals and vitamins. Foods that carry the minerals and vitamins. Foods that carry the minerals and vitamins. When the primitive people adopt the food of modern civilization, their teeth decay just as ours do. Minerals and vitamins. When the primitive people Adopt the food of modern civilization, their teeth decay just as ours do. Adopt the food of modern civilization, their teeth decay just as ours do. Adopt the food of modern civilization, their teeth decay just as ours do.
He first visited Switzerland to study whether greater nutrition could be obtained from foods produced at higher altitudes, such as in the Swiss Alpines. He discovered the isolated Lechental Valley, a community compelled by its very isolation to eat locally produced foods. Here he made physical examinations of teeth, recorded data, collected menus, and made photographs of the people. Samples of food and saliva were taken for later analysis in his laboratory. The children had well-formed teeth. The children had well-formed teeth. The children had well-formed teeth.
Now, what I want people to note, especially with these Swiss people and later with the people from the Outer Hebrides, notice the food they're eating, because a lot of people that promote Weston Price's diet erroneously promote the idea that Weston Price promoted some sort of meat-centered diet. That's not the case at all. He promoted a diet of unrefined foods. But let's take a look at what these Swiss people were eating.
Good physiques and an apparent immunity to disease and dental problems. They ate mainly dairy products, whole rye bread, and plant foods such as potatoes and cabbage. Whole rye bread and plant foods such as potatoes and cabbage. Whole rye bread and plant foods such as potatoes and cabbage. Meat was eaten sparingly, usually potatoes and cabbage. Meat was eaten sparingly, usually potatoes and cabbage. Meat was eaten sparingly.
Meat was eaten sparingly. And they didn't eat very much fish because of the isolation.
Usually only once a week. In contrast, Swiss children living in modernized districts had widespread tooth decay, facial and dental arch deformities, and greater susceptibility to disease. Their diet: refined flour, a high intake of sweets, chocolate, sweetened fruits, and a reduced use of dairy products. Intake of sweets, chocolate, sweetened fruits, and a reduced use of dairy products. Intake of sweets, chocolate, sweetened fruits, and a reduced use of dairy products.
Does that remind you perhaps of the modern-day American diet quite a bit?
On his next journey, Dr. Price visited the Outer Hebrides, located off the coast of Scotland. Here he made similar studies among the Gaelic people who inhabit these isolated islands. These rather barren islands have very few trees and little fertility. The islands are often subjected to rough seas and blizzards from the North Atlantic. Most of the people are of early Scottish descent, possessing a physique that rivals that found almost any place in the world. Their teeth are of unusual perfection. The basic foods of these islanders are fish and oat products, such as oatmeal, whole grain breads, and oat products, such as oatmeal, whole grain breads, and oat products, such as oatmeal, whole grain breads, and shellfish. But when the islanders were exposed to the foods of commerce, it was a repetition of what had been found in Switzerland. Bad teeth and general physical degeneration was the result. For example, these two brothers lived under the same roof, but ate differently. The older ate primitive foods and was in excellent health. The younger had extensive tooth decay and a poor physique from eating the foods of commerce. In 1933, Dr. and Mrs. Price visited Alaska to study the Eskimos, one of the last examples of a Stone Age people. The areas they visited were isolated. Travel was often very difficult. Among the Eskimos, Dr. Price discovered examples of...
Another thing that's interesting here, now the Eskimos do have a lot of health concerns to the point where it's, you know, we know that their lack of plant foods is leading to their health concerns. But notice the foods that they eat when they get to them. They were a meat-centered diet, but that's due to the necessity living in the Arctic. But you'll notice they didn't just eat meat. Okay. The other thing is they would eat things like lichen and seaweed and things of that nature too.
Physical excellence and dental perfection seldom found anywhere else in the world. Living in isolated districts on native foods, they had uniformly broad dental arches and typical Eskimo facial patterns. Their general health was excellent. Eskimos ate foods rich in minerals and vitamins, mainly caribou, kelp, berries, rich in minerals and vitamins.
Kelp and berries. Does that sound like a 100% meat diet, like everybody likes to point out? Now, it was a meat-centered diet, and like people like to say, they'll say you'll never see a vegan population in the wild. Well, do you ever see a truly carnivorous population in the wild? You don't, because people evolved to eat plants.
Mainly caribou, kelp, berries, fresh fish, organs of large sea animals, and seal oil. When the Eskimos were exposed to the foods of commerce, there was a marked rise in dental decay and a change in facial and dental arch formation. Dental service was not readily available, and dental pain was often acute among these people. These Indians inhabited northern British Columbia and the Yukon Territory, an area inside the Rocky Mountain Range. This isolated area had to be reached by water and over roads that often were almost impassable. Long ago, these Indians discovered that the white man got scurvy when forced to live for long periods of time in this area where fresh fruits and vegetables were often not available. To avoid this dreaded disease, the Indians ate the adrenal gland and organs of moose and caribou. This gave them the necessary vitamin C, the vitamin that prevents scurvy. Primitive groups of Indians consistently had well-formed facial and dental arches that represented the tribal pattern.
That cracks me up. That sounds like they're making it up. The tribal pattern. What the hell does that even mean? The tribal pattern. That cracks me up.
But new generations, exposed to the foods of commerce obtained at trading posts or through government agencies, showed marked changes in facial and dental arch forms.
You'll see this amongst many native groups, particularly like the Pima Indians in Arizona, that have outrageous amounts of diabetes. There was an excellent book written, although the person that read it was like a liberal kookaburra, and it's named Decolonize Your Diet. You don't have to go as far as it doesn't decolonize your diet, but you should go back to eating unrefined foods predominantly.
Extensive tooth decay was quite evident. By 1934, Dr. Price decided to study the various people who inhabit the many islands of the South Pacific. New Zealand was also included in his studies. Dr. and Mrs. Price lived with these people, collecting and studying data about their living conditions.
also want you to pay attention to what kind of foods that these indigenous people from Oceania ate, and you will notice certain very special foods in this group of people as well that carnivore dieters might not want to acknowledge when they're talking about, the carnivorous diets of, primitive people, because they weren't carnivorous diets.
Not surprisingly, he found that people who ate the foods of the area, shell and scale fish, plant roots, and tropical fruits, and scale fish, plant roots, and tropical fruits, and scale fish, plant roots, and tropical fruits, had developed a very high immunity to dental decay. Also, they had well-formed faces and good dental arches. In their primitive state, less than 1% of their teeth were attacked by tooth decay. But as though echoing a warning from nature herself, the message was clear. Echoing a warning from nature herself. Echoing a warning from nature herself. Echoing a warning from nature herself.
Now, this is why I got back into scientific pantheism, or not even got back into scientific pantheism, I should say, moved from straight scientific pantheism into a pseudo-religious pantheism, a pseudo-spiritual pantheism, was the health message of Ellen G. White and Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. It really does seem like these universal truths are present throughout the religions of the world. And it doesn't just have to do with diet, it has to do with overall lifestyle. Now, does that come from, the Bible and the Quran and all these books being, and the laws of Manu, does that come from them being inspired by God? I would say yes, in a way. It comes from naturalistic observation, nature being God. And in Islam, they talk about submission to nature and submission to God's law. And I think that a lot of that kind of does hold true in a lot of ways, especially when you're considering lifestyle and you consider that the result of breaking nature's law is illness and sickness. There's no need to punish people because they're punished for their sins by the outcome of disobeying the rules of healthy living.
The message was clear. Those who ate foods outside their natural diets had a rise in tooth decay of over 29%.
Now take note, their natural diets, as this is saying, there is a natural diet for humanity, and that natural diet is essentially a diet of unrefined whole foods. That's what the human animal thrives on, is unrefined whole foods, and the human animal thrives a lot better on a plant-centered diet where about 90% of the diet is plant foods, and where most of those plant foods are things like vegetables and legumes, followed by whole grains and other things of that nature, okay? And also, of course, some healthy oils thrown in and what have you. But that's the point, is there is a specific diet for all of humanity. The human animal is more or less all obeying the same diet, whether you're in Tanzania or Chile or the British Isles, etc. Now, the divergences from that diet have occurred due to inability to access certain foods at certain seasons of the year and things like that. But that is the diet that humans thrive on.
Outside their natural diets had a rise in tooth decay of over 29%. By 1935, Dr. and Mrs. Price went on one of their longest trips, some 6,000 miles, to study 30 different African tribal groups. These people lived in the Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, the Congo, and Tanganyika. Africa was a fertile area for studying primitive peoples. last of the large continents to be invaded and explored by civilized man. It had one of the largest native populations living under primitive conditions.
Still does.
The primitive Africans were healthy, robust people. They had good teeth and fine dental arches. Their overall physique was excellent.
Now listen to what their diet consisted of, because carnivore dieters always love to use Africans as a sign of, oh my God, everybody was a natural carnivore at the beginning, because people like to push that out of Africa theory. But did indigenous Africans follow a carnivorous diet? No.
Their diet, dairy products, fish, vegetables, and eggs of certain species. An important source of fat-soluble vitamin is the blood of steers. It is a basic food of the Maasai, people of outstanding physiques. For those who ignored tribal nutritional laws, characteristic types of deformity and tooth decay frequently developed. One of Dr. and Mrs. Price's last journeys was to Peru. Here he compared modern Peruvian society with the ancient Incas. This was done by examining more than 1,000 human skulls of the ancients. Dr. Price did not find one significant
Of the ancients.
deformity of the dental arches. He also found examples of early brain surgery.
Now, what that's called trepidation. When somebody got smacked in the head with a war club, they would basically chisel a hole in the skull or use a hand drill to put a hole in the skull to relieve the pressure, to keep the, to let the pressure escape so that the brain didn't get smushed or hemorrhaged from the increasing pressure.
Evidence of the high degree of civilization of the ancients. Primitive Peruvian Indians, subsisting on natural foods indigenous to their country, were healthy and robust, with fine teeth and sturdy bodies. But those who ate the foods of commerce were degenerating and dying rapidly. This was another warning, another indication to obey nature's laws. Another indication to obey nature's laws. Another indication to obey nature's laws. Another indication to obey nature's laws.
Dr. Price discovered that with individuals undergoing a degenerative process, a chemical analysis of the food disclosed a marked reduction in the intake of some of the important vitamins and minerals. In the intake of some of the important vitamins and minerals. In the intake of some of the important vitamins and minerals. Even primitive societies share our blight when they eat. Primitive societies share our blight when they eat our food. Primitive societies share our blight when they eat our food. Dr. Price discovered a substance he called Activator X.
We now call Activator X vitamin K or vitamin K2. Both are probably Activator X. Vitamin K1 and vitamin K2 are basically responsible for helping the minerals get into the bones and out of the arteries in a lot of ways.
It belongs in the fat-soluble group. He recognized that the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and F had been
If you're wondering what vitamin F is, vitamin F are the essential fatty acids, the omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids.
deficient in practically every case of active tooth decay. He found that an essential characteristic of the successful dietary programs of primitive societies related to a liberal source of the fat-soluble activator group, such as is found in seafood, especially fish roe, bird's eggs, butterfat of mammal's milk, organs of animals, and insects. Even though the diets of primitive people differed greatly as to type and source, even though the diets of primitive people differed greatly as to type and source, even though the diets of primitive people differed greatly as to type and source, all diets provided a large increase in water-soluble vitamins over modern diets. Provided a large increase in water-soluble vitamins over modern diets. Provided a large increase in water-soluble vitamins over modern diets by at least a factor of 4. And at least 10 times more of the fat-soluble vitamins and mineral activators than the displacing diets of commerce. Times more of the fat-soluble vitamins and mineral activators than the displacing diets of commerce. Times more of the fat-soluble vitamins and mineral activators than the displacing diets of commerce. Quality rather than quantity. Diets of commerce. Quality rather than quantity. Was the important factor. Since these foods were unrefined, they also supplied from 2 to 8 times, the minimum daily requirements of calcium, and phosphorus, and up to 28 times that of magnesium. The minimum daily requirements of calcium and phosphorus, and up to 28 times that of magnesium.
Now, some people might wish to take note the importance of magnesium in bone and tooth health, as well as the importance of heart health, and that's a very important thing that these people are consuming such high amounts of magnesium after the chemical analysis of their foodstuffs was analyzed.
The entire treatment of food, from planting to preparation, was important. Dr. Price believed that changes in nutrition could occur with a change in agricultural methods, and that there was a direct relationship between poor quality foods and the depletion of the minerals in the soil.
Now, that's something that you have to understand. This is nothing new to think about the depletion of minerals in the soil and the need to use things like potash and things like that. These mineral fertilizers were being used for hundreds of years. My grandfather understood farming practices, and yeah, you put minerals on your crops. Potassium, calcium, magnesium, etc. These would be put on crops to help them grow, and anybody that is familiar with hydroponics knows about that as well.
Primitive societies were aware of the relationship between what they ate and their own reproduction, so nutrition was carefully planned for expectant mothers.
Keep that in mind, because it's only been rather recently that prenatal nutrition has been really a commonplace in the West, in modern society.
When the foods of commerce were substituted for their natural diet, there was evidence of abnormal facial patterns.
Take very good note of this family. This is very interesting right here.
And susceptibility to certain diseases. This Maori family demonstrates the link between nutrition and birth deformities. The eldest child has a normal, well-formed body. After her birth, the parents moved to a plantation and began to eat the foods of commerce. Their second child has a depressed
So what I'm going to do here, and that's the quote, life in all its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed, Dr. Weston A. Price, Doctor of Dental Sciences. I'm going to call it quits for this video. It's going to be the end of this video, and I'm going to continue with the use of exercise to promote proper gene expression in the next couple videos I do. And that's all for this video.